Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to our channel, and thanks for logging on. Today, we are in the presence of a champion, the 2014 Aiguille d'Or winner at the GPHG, the Oscars of watchmaking. This is the Breguet Classique Chronometrie 7727 in 18-karat red gold. You can see and you can purchase this extraordinary 20 beat per second chronometer on our website. Subscribe to our YouTube channel if you enjoy these videos, and please click on the card in the upper right-hand corner of the screen at any time during this video to see our full sales listing for this watch, with additional accessories included in the sale, high-resolution images for your desktop, and naturally, complete pricing details for this 7727 and our entire collection of pre-owned Breguet timepieces. This watch is more than just a champion, it's an innovator. Often when we discuss Breguet, we talk about innovations wrought during the 18th and 19th century. This watch is a delightful contemporary exception to that rule, as it brought truly new techniques and technology to the world of watchmaking in an everyday wearable and comparatively affordable package. It's a large modern dress watch, 41 millimeters in diameter, not inclusive of the crown. Nevertheless, it's relatively slim at 9.9 millimeters thick with a generously rounded domed style bezel, so it will slip underneath a dress cuff. From lug to lug, the watch is a contemporary 50.3 millimeters across the wrist, so it's right on the bubble of that critical 50 millimeter lug to lug dimension that I consider essential for wrists that are smaller. By male standards, I consider that to be about 14 centimeters circumference to 16 and a half. And once again, my wrist oval in profile is 16. But the watch sits easily due to the fact that the simple soldered or welded on lugs, beautifully finished, back to that in a moment, allow the strap to move unconstrained. So if you want to pull it down around the tight curve of a small wrist, there's no constraint in the movement of the strap. It's not pinned against the case. And a flagship piece deserves a flagship clasp. This one, extraordinary, with a Breguet B in filigree style on the buckle. You then press the twin triggers to open it up, and absolute security, but also a good deal of elegance. As you can see, the system is somewhat open, skeletonized to an extent, to keep it low in profile and handsome in finish. As you'll note, a combination of satin and polish, beautifully executed. It has the twin trigger security, so you have to press them to open. It can't pop open, not friction fit. That's a refinement rarely seen on dress watches, sometimes seen on sports watches. Much appreciated here. The clasp gives the watch a satisfying heft about it, as it does add considerably more mass than a traditional pin buckle. The timepiece is standard Breguet style, which is to say beautifully made but distinctive. The lugs are soldered on, and as you can see, all of the material at the joint of the lug in the case has been removed, so it's a seamless junction, very artfully crafted. You'll also note that the strap is held on by screws, more secure than spring bars. This has been standard practice for Breguet on the Classique family. Gives you an extra measure of security alongside the deployant clasp. The case flank, beautifully coined, is cold rolled and then hand finished, and then you can see there's a little bit of overlap between the case back, the bezel lip, and the case band. It's an interesting look, but it's not nearly as intriguing as the dial itself, which is not just silvered solid gold executed on a rose lathe by a guilloche guided by hand, but it contains, thanks to that rose lathe and artisan, no fewer than 6 individual rose lathe guilloche patterns. And there are a few quirks. You'll note, if you look carefully, that the dial is somewhat justified towards 6 o'clock. So the hands, the scales, the displays, all of them are somewhat closer to the bottom of the case when held in profile than they are to the top. It's discreet. You probably don't notice if I don't mention it, but I should mention it because this watch has a lot of character, and that's part of it. Now the dial, of course, featuring rose lathe work. We can get real close now because we don't need to see the watch on the wrist. The rose lathe etches into the gold, which is then silvered to add this beautiful sheen. Details matter, and you can see little rose gold indices outboard of the stylized Breguet Roman numerals. Breguet hands, blued steel in the classical fashion, and you'll note the secret signature, as they call it, a little flourish flanking 12 o'clock on both sides. But there is more going on here. You see the power reserve scale, 60 hours. You see constant seconds in a subdial at 12 o'clock, as well as a crazy 2-second foudroyant. The watch beats 20 times per second, or 10 hertz, which you can see ghosted just underneath the Breguet marquee at 9 o'clock. So what does that mean? So you have a 20 beat per second, 2-second foudroyant and some inscrutable shape etched into the dial. Well, here's what that is. That's actually the top of a magnetic balance pivot pair. The watch beats at 72,000 vibrations per hour. That's 20 ticks per second, so twice the rate of a Zenith El Primero. Impressively, despite beating 20 times per second, it has a 60-hour manually wound power reserve, and yes, because this is a manual wind watch with an original retail over 40,000 US, winding it is a pleasure. You feel it, the sensation, the detents of the click are sensational. The sound is between refinement and a crisp report. It's wonderful to experience, and I'm happy to say, it feels delightfully mechanical. Now, when you pull the crown out, you do engage hacking. So not only does this watch allow you to set it to the second, it allows you, if your eyes are good enough, to set it to the 20th of a second. Now, magnetic balance pivots are one of several patented innovations in this watch. We may as well go back and review what they are. First, the magnetic balance pivot. You have two magnets of unequal strength on both sides of the balance staff, which mounts the balance. On one side, you have a stronger magnet that effectively attracts the balance pivot and holds it pinned against the capstone and the pivot jewel. On the other side, the balance is effectively floating. It's suspended. So the balance is only in contact on one side. So friction is dramatically reduced. Another factor that reduces friction dramatically is the aerodynamic style balance, in which the variable inertia balance bolts of the rugged free-sprung balance are actually recessed inside the rim. At 72,000 vibrations per hour, that does matter. It does make a difference. Now, the balance system has another advantage by virtue of the magnets, which is that the pivots can actually move around a little bit unconstrained, and that imparts an extra degree of shock resistance. And because the magnets are forcing the pivots back into position after every shock, it quickly recenters. The result of all of that refinement and tech is that the watch is rated by Breguet to no worse than -1 second plus 3 seconds per day. So chronometry is in the name, and chronometry in practice is the result. There's also a double silicon hairspring and a silicon escapement. So let me explain. You can't have a three-dimensional overcoil structure in the Breguet fashion with silicon, which is generally etched in 2 dimensions. So having 2 hairsprings made of silicon that are pivoted 180 degrees out of phase means that when one is not beating concentrically with respect to gravity and speeding up, the other is slowing down. Turn them around, vice versa, and they help to even each other out. They also allow the magnetic pivots to be used because the silicon hairspring is amagnetic. You also have a silicon escape wheel and a silicon anchor. Operating unlubricated, you do still have traditional pallet stones, however. It's not a full silicon anchor, but you do get the benefits of the anti-magnetism and the reduced friction. If you were to look at the watch closely, you'd also note that the shock protection is the parachute system originally pioneered by Breguet. A variant of what you see on La Tradition is present on this movement. A lot going on here, and I struggle to contain all of it in the scope of one of these videos, but you can see the movement is finished in the Breguet tradition. Although the bridges themselves are likely CNC'd to create the first cut, the finishing within all of the jewel countersinks, and you can really see it from this angle, as well as the edge of every bridge, is beautifully mirrored. It has the true rounded hand-laid anglage. Every screw head is black polished, which you can see to good advantage as I turn it flush to the camera. There's an immense amount of richly textured Côte de Genève, the kind that is run with an abrasive wheel and not embossed by pressure. This is the real Côte de Genève here. You'll also note beautiful finishing on the metal of the wheels. This is a gorgeous watch, finished beautifully on the front with a rose lathe, finished beautifully by hand on the back with an immense amount of precision engineered in. You have the floating magnetic balance pivots, the parachute system, the silicon escapement, the 20 beat per second beat rate, 72,000 vibrations per hour. It sounds like lifter tick. If you've ever heard lifter tick in a car, it sounds like a double time rattle. It doesn't even sound like a conventional watch movement, but it's absolutely distinctive in its aesthetic as well as its sound. If you're interested in the cutting edge of chronometric precision, new technologies, new materials, what Breguet would be doing if he were alive today, you need to consider the Breguet 7727 Classic Chronometry in rose gold on our website.